A good afternoon and welcome to all our viewers to Wild Earth Live at the Waterhole, where this afternoon we're starting off with the elephant bulls at Tembe. And as we can see, it seems like it's quite a beautiful day there. The sun is shining, which it hasn't been for the last 2 days, and two of them are playing and pushing each other around in the middle of the water. I'm Jaapie Potgieter, and I'll be here to take you through this afternoon safari to see what we have at the watering holes. And what an amazing way to start the afternoon. You can see nothing's really changed here. The young elephants are still playing, still pushing each other around. And now the third one's going into the water. Looks like you got a bit of a deep patch there. What a spectacular afternoon. You can see all the greenery here. You can see the blue sky reflecting in the water. And I mean, I would do the same. If it was a nice warm day, who wouldn't want to swim? Especially in northern KwaZulu-Natal. Harriet, thank you so much. Hello to you too. And I'm sorry to hear that it's raining in Cape Town. I know it's been raining quite a lot down there. There was some cold weather expected over the northern parts and the eastern parts of the country as well, but it looks like it's moved away now. Mercedes, happy Cathay Saturday. Let's hope for some cats later on. We were indeed very, very lucky yesterday afternoon, so I'm hoping we might struck it lucky again today. And now we can see the one elephant's actually, it's just got one dry patch on its back, which is now getting wet. But I always find it amazing when you see them out when they're not in the water. The tusks can be quite dark, and it just goes to show how much they actually use them as tools. Now these elephants have submerged themselves. We can see it's nice and bright white. Amazing to think when you see these large creatures being so at home in water, actually. And they look like they can do this all day. Now, elephants are actually, they're very, very interesting creatures. They've got no air space between the lungs and their body, and the lungs are almost fused to the side walls of the body, which some biologists reckon is from the remnants of a time when they were more aquatic. And they've also got their trunk. They're very capable swimmers, which one wouldn't say if you look at them. Hi, Julia. It's very good to hear from you. And yes, I used to guide at Ngala a few years back. You know, what an amazing place. But I'm very happy to be here now and get to share all these different water holes and the action that takes place around it. And Viv, I have been to Tembe. I've been to Tembe once only, unfortunately. I would love to go again. It's a phenomenal reserve. It's a crucial reserve in a crucial part of the country, forming part of a larger area of wildlife where wildlife transitions between South Africa and Mozambique, or as we like to refer to those areas as corridors. So it's a vital area. Very, very important area to the protection of the elephants in that region in the past. Elephants, ever since the Europeans started coming into southern Africa from the eastern coast, the elephants were prosecuted, and the thick, dense foresty sections and vegetation up in northern KwaZulu-Natal served very, very well as a protective barrier from the hunters of old. Spas, yes, I agree. It is indeed very, very amazing to start this afternoon off with elephants. You can see, especially if they are this active already, we're hoping that it might turn out to be a great afternoon. I think from now it's only going to get a little bit warmer, so the animals will have to come down to come and drink. Greetings, Ari, all the way from the Netherlands. Greetings to you from South Africa. A nice sunny South Africa today. But yeah, we can see these two elephants are now taking a break from playing around, just cooling down. It's quite the process, especially in a pool that's shallower than what the animal's height is. You can see that the elephant has to properly put its head down, roll around to cover all of its body. But it's quite fortunate that the water is deep enough for it to be able to do that. I'm sure when these two are done, which doesn't seem like it'll be anytime soon, they'll cover that wet bodies with some dust. Jive Bunny, yes, the Ngala is indeed white lion territory, and currently two of those animals, the white lions that's moving there, the female that were born there in 2018, and then also there's a new young one that's still around. It's probably about 7-8 months old by now. And I do think that August would be an excellent time to travel. Next year, I think what we've seen this far and what we can see currently is it's the drier season, so lots of action around watering holes. The animals are doing very well all over the protected areas. Olivia, you asking if these elephant tussles do get fatal? They could, potentially. Now, we saw that elephant coming in now. It's got very, very sharp, elongated tusks, and that is essentially a weapon as well. Certainly a tool to help it, aid it in feeding, and help it get to certain food sources. But it's also there to defend itself and definitely also to use as an attack weapon within its defense. They're very, very strong, and often what we find is in some regions where things become a little bit more desperate for water, we find that the pressure becomes severe and animals get agitated, and often you find that the bull elephants have tussles with each other to try and gain the upper rank, try and establish some sort of a hierarchy. And then what we find is occasionally they do have fights, and these fights can easily lead to a fatal injury. And in the past, where I've had the chance to witness some scavengers feed off elephant carcasses, some of those elephant carcasses were due to stab wounds from other elephant bulls. Jive Bunny, I'm so happy to hear that you enjoyed the Ngala safari visits. Yes, it is a very, very special place in the Lowveld. I spent a lot of time there a few years back, um, and also during the COVID pandemic. And I was quite fortunate to spend it there. Indeed, a special place. Good area for cat viewing. It's interesting. What I do like about my position currently is I get to move around a little bit between different reserves, which from a pure experience and learning point of view is amazing. But you get to see the difference in animal behavior and the way habitats affect the animals' behaviors. And that to me is one of those things. It's something that I guess we don't always think about or always necessarily mention, but habitat's got a huge impact on the way animals behave. And the way animals behave in one area doesn't necessarily mean that they'll show similar behavior in another area. And I find that fascinating. One of the best things about having the Africam at so many different watering holes. So speaking of the watering holes, let's leave these elephants for now, and we head over to Tau Lodge and see what's happening there. And here we are back at Tower Lodge, where this afternoon, look at this, we've got a whole troop of baboons. The crocodile seems to be moving a bit. Quite an interesting scenario we've got here. I can see those baboons are making very, very sure about the presence of that crocodile, exactly where that croc is. I find baboons fascinating in the way that they always very alert. Even though they look like they don't pay attention, they pay very careful attention to what's happening around them. In the back, it looks like we've got a spur-winged goose. Bianca, most of the Africam locations I haven't had the privilege of being to, unfortunately, and that's why. Whoa, that was quite cool. That baboon jumped with a baby on the back over a gap there, just avoiding those muddy pools. But Bianca, no, unfortunately, I haven't. I would love to go see some of these areas. I think it is so amazing that we do get to see different scenarios through the Africams, and yeah, that's what makes the show so amazing. Calvin, indeed, it is quite a dangerous situation for baboons, but they're quite adept at doing this. They know the area quite well. Um, Unfortunately, I have seen in periods where it's so dry that there's a huge amount of pressure on watering holes, especially a muddy pool like this will dry up, and that crocodile that we're seeing moving off now would be very, very well hidden because it would completely submerge itself under the mud to make sure that it gets enough moisture. And that's when it becomes dangerous. And occasionally, baboons do get attacked by crocs, and I have witnessed that before. It is absolute chaos, and I'm always surprised to see how baboons run in to try and rescue their peers. There's a very, very strong bond between them, and they will go even if they know that the situation is dangerous. But yes, and that's why they're so alert and they're constantly looking up. Yes, Jive Bunny, there's indeed some mischief here at Tile this afternoon. Baboons are always mischievous. There's always something happen if the little ones are not paying attention to the adults. They're moving around without the supervision. That's usually where the dangerous situations come from. But yeah, what a busy afternoon here. It must be very hot if the baboons are down here at the water. You can see they're just out of the reach of the crocodile. They're on the muddy patches away from the deeper channels where the crocodile through. And the nice thing about having so many eyes is there's always somebody sitting like those two are sitting up and watching. Amanda, I am not sure what these baboons are eating. By the looks of it, it looks like they're plucking some of the plants there. So I'm assuming that they're grabbing some of the seed pods or the grass seeds that's growing there in the greenery. And that's obviously something that they are not able to find further away from the water currently. And it's quite nutritious, high in protein, but I'm pretty sure they'll also go for whatever little insects, bugs, beetles, whatever they might find moving around there for the moisture. They'll grab and they'll also eat. but a big part of baboons' diet is plant material. Cat fan, I'm also a huge fan of baboons. I think baboons are fascinating to watch. They are always doing something. They can be very funny at points. There's a lot of animals, so lots of interaction. I guess in a way we can relate to them a little bit, simply because of the fact that they are primates, or at least we think we can. So there's some bigger baboons there. Judging from that young one there, I'm assuming it's still some females. I haven't seen big male baboon here, but obviously these females play a vital role in this baboon society, and they look like they're quite experienced. You can see the little one is never too far from the mother. A small little three-banded plover off to the left there on the water's edge. There we go. Little one up on the mother's back. And that's amazing to see. And amazing that agility. The little one just riding, holding on, not losing its balance at all. There's a good scratch there. Can you imagine there must be lots of little insects that's plaguing them now, coming up from the water and the moisture. So Nola, your question of whether male baboons participate in the parental care, that is a very good question. And yes, they do. I've noticed baboons, especially sometimes in a situation like this, these baboons are quite relaxed. We can see some of them are just staying in one spot. The little ones are running around carefully. So, in a case where they might get a spook or so, often the troop runs off, and one of the little ones staying behind, I've noticed it's often a young male that runs back. And yes, they indeed do participate in the parental care, more from a protection point of view. And they're the ones that travel between troops once they reach a certain age. They're the ones that will move about. Look at this one, just carefully making sure where that crocodile is. Now, Nola, to get back to your question, the male baboons, they once they reach a certain age, so they're born into their family group, and once they reach a certain age, they'll move away because they need to go find their own troop that they can become part of. And because the older, bigger baboons within the group that they are will push them to the side and they will prevent them from trying to get a chance to mate or become dominant within that group. And what's interesting, it's also nature's way of maintaining the integrity of the gene pool. But once those young male baboons join a new group, they will usually be out on the outskirts, and gradually they will start finding their way and finding their purpose within the group and getting accepted. And usually, when that happens, you'll find that some of these groups or some of these young males, in order to win the favor of some of the females and also to move up in rank, they do participate in the parental care. Whether it's from a point of view of just playing with the young ones, supporting them, and like I mentioned earlier, sometimes if danger does come about and one of the young ones get left behind, I've noticed that it's often a young male baboon that runs back and grabs the little one and catches up with the rest of the troop just to bring it back to safety. So yes, they certainly do play a part. Not as active as the females, but they do definitely play. They are also there as an example of the strength and dominance and the seriousness of the safety of the troop that the big male baboons display and exercise. There's a nice big elephant there in the background. Riley, baboons can be quite scary in certain cases, and it's interesting because baboons throughout most of Africa, within traditional stories and traditional um, tales about them, it's an animal that's associated with magic, and it is an animal that's often portrayed as a animal doing the bidding of certain traditional healers, and it's usually got a bit of a scary association with it. But having said that, it's interesting. I wonder where that would come from. I mean, they can come forth as quite aggressive, but and they're also known. The males are known to fight severely for their ranks within groups and territories. And they've got massively long canines, but they are indeed not known to attack people. And as far as I know, there's not many incidences where baboons have caused any human deaths. Well, at least not that I know of. But they also just making sure that all the other baboons in the troop are safe. Usually, that's the main priority for those big male baboons. And they've got a tough job. Being at the top is not always easy. Once they're there, they need to actively defend that position constantly before a new, younger male moves in and takes over. And it's not an easy position to get to, and it's quite short lived. Sometimes you have more than one big male baboon taking up that. But quite interesting. We are seeing a few waterbuck coming down here, talking about males. And it looks like 3 male waterbuck. 2 of them look like they're quite large. Harriet, I see you are mentioning a male baboon wandering through the suburbs. So that is when baboons can become real troublesome. I just want to point out the baboon that's walking past now. That baboon looks like it's missing a tail. I wonder what that would be from. Maybe it is a young male that had a bit of a tussle with one of the larger ones. But to get back to the baboons, it can be a problem in the suburbs. I know that that is one of the things, unfortunately, in today's world where we have situations that human suburbs are moving into areas that's occupied by baboons or the natural spaces where the baboons are living. That is where we have situations that they become problems. And it's just because they're quite intelligent, they learn very easily, and unfortunately, they learn bad habits quite easily, which include stealing food and trying to get access to food and waste because it's something that can be found a little bit more easier often the food that they might find naturally. And I know down in the Cape region of South Africa is, of course, after big fires that destroy massive amounts of the mountainscapes, then food can be very tricky to find. Baboons do tend to cause a lot of trouble in the cities. But I've also seen some interesting videos. I've seen some videos of baboons getting chased on the roofs of houses in Cape Town, literally with a little news banner underneath, looking like a fugitive escaping from the police. In that case, I guess it can be quite funny and draw quite a lot of media attention. Joan, baboons can definitely have some human-like expressions. I guess especially when they're unsure about something. Sometimes you might even look like they smile once they've done something. But I often find the most interesting expressions when they are quite upset about something, especially in the young ones. Camilla, there's definitely some good, nice, big waterbuck bulls with very decent horns around this water now. Some of them actually still look quite young, but it's quite interesting to see so many males being called a waterbuck. I mean, even the name suggests the fact that they're always close to water or found quite close to water, and they do have very high water requirements, especially compared to some of the other antelope. So, big waterbuck bulls, they do keep their territories nearby watering holes often. And then when it gets drier and they become less territorial during a dry season, we often find that they do come closer to the water quite often. But this green grass and green vegetation on the wet mud is obviously attracting quite a lot of attention. There's a nice big giraffe in the background also having a drink. Hudson, I see you're asking what bird was at the waterbuck earlier. Now, I am not sure exactly which one you're referring to. If it might be the one where there was a spur-winged goose standing right in front of the big male waterbuck we had a little bit earlier, and that is one of the wildfowl that we find in South Africa. Quite an interesting bird. It's got very interesting markings, black and white and red. Oh, we've got quite a lot of waterbuck around here today. There we go. There's a view of that spur-winged goose. And at the back by the baboon, there's a yellow-billed stork. And then you can see some of the three-banded plovers in the water. You see that waterbuck is struggling to get out of the wet mud there. It's a blacksmith lapwing. It's quite busy. Now that spur-winged goose is quite an interesting animal. It's called a spur-winged goose because it's got a spur right on the wrist part of the wing, and that spur, it's thought that they use it in their altercations between males. It's quite a prominent spur. When the bird's perched on the ground or moving like this, we don't always see it. Sometimes in flight you can see it, but it's a very, very interesting looking bird. And we can see the bright and prominent colors is something that's quite interesting in nature. Usually when we have bright colors, it signals something, or colors are usually pointing to the fact that there might be some sort of a defense mechanism, almost as a warning sign to other creatures. And with a spur-winged goose, what happens is they eat a type of beetle, a beetle that's within the blister beetle family, and their bodies actually synthesize the toxins within that beetle, and sometimes it gets synthesized and it moves all the way up to those spurs, and in some cases even the bird's flesh is regarded as toxic to eat. I guess it would depend on what portion of the diet those beetles actually make up. But yeah, interesting bird. Very, very interesting bird. It's quite recognizable as well. Red on the face to varying degrees in different individuals, and then also the black and white body. Zane's asking whether birds are vegetarian or meat eaters. Zane, to a degree, all birds are insectivorous. They do eat quite a bit of insects, and by default, but we also get some birds like the geese, or in this case, a duck. This is actually a duck, not a goose. We don't have any naturally occurring geese in Africa, other than the ones that's been brought in and bred. But these birds, waterfowl, have quite a lot of plant material, predominantly plant material in their diets, and they eat grass seeds, they eat aquatic plants. But, however, during that process, lots of other insects and things hiding and moving in and about that wet plant material, they can't help but to actually ingest some of those insects. Some of them actively go after insects, like the spur-winged goose, like those moorhens down there. The Egyptian goose predominantly goes after grass seeds, plant material. and the insect that it ingests is more of a byproduct of its feeding. You can see a nice big buffalo, looks like a buffalo bull from where I am coming down. And if you compare the size, I know it's far off to that elephant. This is quite interesting. Let's see what's happening here. Frank, we are indeed very, very fortunate to be able to watch this live. Like, the Africam provides us the opportunity to get a little glimpse of what these animals go through in the middle of the day. And that's one thing that I've often thought about is on a normal safari. You go out in the early morning and the later afternoon. Those are the periods of the day that it's less warm and animals tend to be a little bit more active, depending on the species, of course. Um, at least from a point of view of somebody that would like to see animals interact in some action. But in the middle of the day, when it's very, very hot, when people go and rest or take a little siesta, for those that's on holiday, of course, well, some people need to work, but it's not like the animals aren't doing anything, and they're not always just go down and lay down in a nice little shady spot. They actually do still have things to do, they still have requirements to fill. So they'll often move down to watering holes. They know it's a quiet period, especially from a point of view of encountering danger. Cat fan, you've got quite a good question here where you're asking whether the young male baboons that leave their herd, their troops, if they go and form their own troops. They don't actually. They move. They might form or join up with one or two other young males and then move a little bit. But they often what they do is they actually join other groups, already existing troops, which might be quite far from their natal troop. It might be a nearby troop, and then they kind of form these little groups on the side where they'll still keep to themselves because any other males that they might interact with, they know that there is competition there, future competition. But they do form these little groups of younger, that's like subgroups within the troop that they've moved towards, where they will kind of help and assist each other, even if it's just by finding food or um, yeah, taking examples from the others of how to engage within the troop, especially once it's already started forming bonds with some of the females and some of the other younger baboons. But they don't necessarily form bachelor troops. Wherever that might be, I'm not saying it's completely impossible. I mean, baboons are quite intelligent and adaptable animals, and in some areas, I wouldn't be surprised if that does happen. But I think that would be more of a momentarily sufficient way of surviving, or for the for the purpose of finding resources more so out of a common needs point of view rather than forming bachelor troops and then moving into larger troops. They usually try and look for already existing troops and then try and work their way within that. Now you can see there's a lot of animals coming down here. Looks like there's quite a wind blowing from the dust. I can see the dust gets picked up and blown quite far. It's just something that doesn't look as apparent near the water. There's a nice big group of wildebeest coming down now, and some zebra. There's a group of elephants there, one buffalo bull, few waterbuck, one giraffe, and a troop of baboons. It looks like things are really heating up now. But it's interesting to see. We're noticing that, look at this crocodile. He's watching very carefully. I can see the waterbucks paying attention to him now. But I think maybe the distraction of all the animals moving on the other side had the waterbuck look away, and the croc probably also noticed that. I'm interested to see what this croc would do. Judging from its size, I don't think this croc would go after even that younger waterbuck. Might be a little bit ambitious. But having said that, crocodiles are opportunists like any predator. Catfan, that is in baboon society is indeed complex. There's so many different studies that's been done on it on different areas, so many different uh, kinds of ongoing monitoring of certain well-known troops. I know down in Cape Town, there's been baboon monitoring to try and mitigate the human-animal conflict for years now. And some of those baboon monitors are so clued up with what's happening in each of those troops, and they know the individuals, they know how the dynamics change, and it's a constant change. It's a very complex society, and a lot of it is very much influenced by the environment that they occupy, as well as their proximity to other baboons within an area. And they're resourceful, so they adapt. Very interesting creatures. Jive Bunny, I think indeed that croc heard the list of animals. I think so. I think it was probably on its way, maybe to just get a better view of what's happening that side. You can see the elephants are moving on now, and which is quite interesting. It's always funny. You happen to get one of those glimpses of when all the animals are coming down, and then the next thing they all just disappear. So we're indeed very lucky to be seeing this. Joan Mello, we don't see too many predators during the middle of the day, especially at a watering hole like this where it's quite exposed, I mean, it's not impossible, but this is generally the time of the day where most of the large predators would take a breather or take a bit of a rest in the shade, off on the side, sometimes near watering hole, just to keep an eye out for an opportunity, but they tend to be less active. And then the large predators like the cats are known to be a little bit more active during the night, and that's only because it provides them a little bit more of an advantage to hunting. It's also cooler. They do exercise and exert massive amounts of energy when they are hunting or looking to hunt. They move massive distances at night. So during the daytime, they preserve it. It's just the the chance of them overexerting themselves and exhaustion setting in is the risk is too big during the day. All right, and we're back at Tembe where we can see quite a few elephants. Looks like the young bulls are still in the area. What an impressive elephant there to our left. The elephant, he doesn't look that old and he still has it, and he's got, oh, well, actually, now that I'm looking at it, all of them, well, 3 of these 4, that's very impressive. You can see this area certainly an area where the large tuskers or that genetics have been well preserved over the years. And what I find interesting about elephants, and it's quite difficult to always know exactly how old an elephant is, especially if you haven't seen the animals grow up and you don't know their exact ages. I mean, there are some reliable cues one can use to kind of judge the age, but I find elephant bulls with large tusks are sometimes a little bit trickier. And what we do know is that when elephants are at a young age and they have decent sets of tusks, we refer to them as emerging tuskers. But what a lot of people might not know is only once the elephant reaches its end of its prime, usually around 45 years of age, that's often when we find them having a huge growth spurt within their tusk growth. And that, usually in those last few years, that's when they become tuskers. And from then, the elephant's got maybe another good 10 years or so, in the wild at least. It's very rarely that elephant bulls reach ages older than 50 in the wild, maybe up to 55. And what I also find is you don't often see these elephant bulls with the larger tusks engaging in a lot of pushing and fighting. In fact, it could actually be a bit of a risk for them, a risk of breaking the tusk. Um, Maybe another reason why they only get that growth spurt after their prime, to give them the chance to compete properly. And big elephant bulls with beautiful tusks, they do often break them, especially when they're quite long, depending on their size and shape. And these are some very, very impressive elephants here. To have three elephants drinking at the watering hole at the same time with tusk size like that, oof, that's rare to see nowadays, especially in South Africa. Joan, you're saying that Tembe is the prettiest of all the watering holes, you think? It is a very pretty watering hole. With that, I fully agree. Whether it's the prettiest, I don't know. I don't know if I'll be able to make that call at this stage. I think I think it's difficult to say that for sure. It's certainly the greenest at this point. And I think that's just because of the region that it is in. But yeah, it is indeed a very pretty watering hole. So these elephants are cooling down and they are just drinking some water. So while they continue with this, I think we're gonna head over to look at some blessbok at Founders. Look at that. Looks like some young ones. You can see there's a bit of a breeze going here. Maybe it's because it's up on the hill. These two look of similar age. You just see the jaws moving there, so they definitely chewing the cud. An interesting antelope. It's got quite a pale face, quite a pale body, but being antelopes of the open plains serves them quite well. They also need to communicate with each other. Got excellent eyesight, so those lighter markings certainly do play a big part. You can see with these animals, they're still very young. They haven't quite developed the well-known white markings on the face and forehead that they're known for. Very resilient animals, these. I can see from the way the bush in the background shaking, and it looks like the wind's going quite strong. You can see the ears up. So now, being near the water here, they need to listen very carefully for anything approaching. They're going to have to listen out more carefully than they would if it wasn't this windy. And you see the jaw muscles going there, and that bottom jaw rotating. Now, for a moment there, I thought it was the muscle flexing all the way into the neck, but I see it's just the wind. And it's definitely the muscles all the way from the mouth to the cheeks. And there's that characteristic white rump, clearly visible. And then we've got a bit of a view of the plains in the background. You can see it's quite open. Good morning to you too, Sandy Franklin, all the way from Tennessee. Oh, good morning to you. Well, good afternoon here in South Africa. And yeah, very good to hear from you. Glad you're joining in. Just look at those rolling hills there. Completely different landscape from what we saw at Tembe earlier. Way more open. You can see this watering hole. It's got quite the viewpoint. Now, out on these hills, I think it must be quite cool at this point. Maybe a little bit windy. That's why the animals are maybe not rushing down to the water. Might be hiding in among some of that greener areas there. You can see the hillside stipulated by these patches of brush and small shrubs. I wonder what happened to the breast spot. They're probably laying down just over the wall here. But generally, when it's this windy, animals tend to go for a little bit more shelter from the wind, not only because it might be cold or because of the weather, more because of the fact that for certain antelopes and animals that could potentially become prey, they tend to use those valleys because that way it'll be less windy and they'll be able to hear better and be able to look out for danger better. But since it's so windy here, we're not seeing too many animals here. I think let's head over to the Africa Majuma where we have some elephants. And this is quite interesting. A different view of elephants. Some low felt elephants. And they look like they're more wrinkly than the ones at Tembe. It's quite interesting to see the contrast These two, they do look like two bull elephants to me as well. But now, having seen those elephants with the larger tusks at Tembe, we can see these two seem like they've got a little bit shorter tusks. Interesting, the elephant on the left hand side has got one shorter tusk, one longer tusk. Live bunny, I red hartebeest. I have to say I haven't seen a red hartebeest in a very, very long time. In fact, I can't even remember now when was the last time I saw one. But what a fascinatingly strange looking animal. I find them very beautiful. I think one thing I've noticed is the longer I do this job, the more I get fascinated by the antelope. I mean, I still think one of my favorite is the impala. And then there's some very, very impressively beautiful antelopes like the sable, the roan antelope. But yeah, I think hartebeests are very, very interesting animals. It looks like there's something happening here. There's some impala there. But it looks like these elephants have been alerted. Not sure what. You can see the one in front's just stopping. The other one's facing the other way. So something's drawn their attention. And them having a keen sense of smell as they do, they might have picked up on the scent of maybe other elephants approaching or something else. You can see the trunks are just dangling down. That means they're concentrating on something that we're not seeing at this point. There we go. That one's dusting up a bit. Let's see if the other one moves off or stays. I think these two are very likely traveling together. That's quite interesting. That elephant is picking up a stick or a branch and it looks like it's scratching himself. That is incredible. That is not something I've seen often. I wonder if the fact that he's been waiting for the other one and that was the only thing nearby to give it a proper scratch was the reason for him doing that, but I have not really seen that often. I have seen elephants use sticks in other ways, and I've certainly seen elephants throw sticks at either a group of people or at other creatures near the water's edge. But that's very, very interesting. Elephants are considered, amongst animals, they are considered tool users, and they are so due to the fact that they have a trunk and they can utilize that trunk as a tool. And I know they did a study in a zoo with Asian elephants where they would put, I can't remember what it was, but it was canned food over the edge of a dip And what we would see is then the elephants would, because the elephants won't be able to cross. It's like a deep trench between them and the food, and then they tested the different ways in which they used their trunk to actually get to that canned food and open it and access the food inside. And we've also, I'm sure a lot of people have seen videos of elephants painting pictures using brushes. But an elephant out in the wild using a stick to scratch its belly, that's not something you see often. Now, these two elephants are still standing still, and the fact that their trunks are dangling, I'm wondering what they are picking up on. The fact that they're not running away means it's not something that's spooking them. So I think they'd be more concerned if it was a predator. So it's probably other elephants that might be in the area. Jive Bunny, so you said you've seen red hartebeest at Amakala with Eric. And that's pretty special. Oh, like I said, I remember when last I saw a red hartebeest. I know it is a strange looking animal. Um, actually wouldn't mind seeing one. I know the last time I saw hartebeest, I saw Liechtenstein's hartebeest along South Africa's wild coast. There's a group in some regions that they've reintroduced there over the years, and I do what I especially one of the things about hartebeest that fascinates me is their tracks and the signs that they leave. Uh, that whole group of antelope is quite their tracks can be quite similar, and it can be quite tricky to identify and distinguish out in the field. So that's something that I do often look at very, very carefully. And for that very reason, I do enjoy seeing them, even if I don't see them, but just come across the signs of them. I find that fascinating. So just to just to remind our viewers about the Green Season Grand Tour, and that will be hosted by James Henry. It'll be in April and May next year, 2025, and there's 8 spots, only 2 spots available, and it cannot be missed, for sure not. It'll be an extremely exciting event, and so many unique and exciting features. There'll be many of the current and old wild earth presenters. There'll be a rhino collaring experience, something that is very, very necessary and needed within the conservation sphere today. And it'll also feature a 2 wild film school workshop, a very, very unique opportunity to get behind the scenes and into what it takes to be a wildlife filmmaker. And James will be the private guide throughout the experience. So, certainly something that cannot be missed. So it seems like these two elephants are now moving off. So that one's hesitating a little bit. Looks like it almost wanted to check that elephant dung, the next little pile. And judging from the flat surface that it's moving on, it looks like there's quite a lot of animals that move through there, but also quite a lot of elephant. The elephant tracks from this distance is relatively easy to see in terms of its flat, broad shape and the way the light reflects off it here. So these two elephants might actually, maybe they're just scoping out what other herds or what other familiar animals have moved through. Maybe they were waiting there hoping that some elephants might come down. It's amazing this indirect communication that's going on here. Just through walking through an area, the dung left. When we track animals and we look at dung, we look at whether it's old or new or fresh. But for elephants, they pick up so much more, and I often wonder how much they can tell from just that one dung bolus. But I think these two elephants are going to move into the thicker brush there. So I heard there's an elephant bull at the watering hole at Tau. So let's head over there and we see what the African has got us there. Oh wow. That looks like a big bull elephant. It looks like he's resting on that young one. Now, this is an interesting situation. In this case, I think the elephant cow and those young ones are probably not overly happy to see this bull elephant. It looks like he's only got one tusk. He looks quite mature. You can see there's a very, that one tusk is thick. It looks like it's well worn down. It's got a big head. And this is the type of animal that a herd would ideally try to either avoid or keep the interactions brief with. This elephant might have ulterior motives and it might actually be looking for females. It might be in heat, but I can see the tip of his trunk's wet, so he's definitely had some water to drink. An animal this size is usually quite imposing, and the females in the herds don't really have a choice but to endure the animal for the time being. No, they can just stand for such a long period of time and just kind of check each other out and try to figure out what the ulterior motives is. The funny thing is, unfortunately for some of these herds of elephants, when a big bull like that moves into an area, if they were nearby, it's very difficult for them to shake that bull because he'll just follow their trail, and sometimes it could go on for a day or two or even longer. Now we've got some wildebeest coming down. It's quite a decent size group, this. You can see the one just leading ahead, looks like a bull moving up. I wonder where our crocodile is, because as I remember, it was also somewhere in that spot. So let's see how the wildebeest approaches that. There's lots of young ones in between. Yes, cat fan. Elephants are extremely smart. They have so many different various ways that they communicate, and they are so in tuned with the other elephants nearby and know exactly where the animals are moving, which animals. I think it's incredible that a matriarch, a female in a herd, can often recognize quite a few animals, and then also they can recognize even more animals through their sounds. And elephants are able to pick up infrasound, and they're capable of hearing sounds at much lower frequencies than what our ears can, and they can communicate over several kilometers with each other. So you can imagine that network of elephant communication constantly running within an area. So it's important for them to recognize and be able to distinguish between the different groups. I guess that also plays a role in how they kind of navigate pressure around watering holes. I saw the waterbuck earlier, but you can see now these young wildebeest, they're slipping in the mud here. And this is quite something, actually. It's deep mud, of course, and they're drinking what seems to be further away from the water's edge in some cases, and that's probably from the water that's siphoned into certain tracks or certain pools that where elephants step or previous some of the other mammals have stepped. But they do seem to be struggling, and I think as time goes on, and what happens often at the end of the dry season, especially towards end of August into September, before the rains come, and it starts heating up, and the water evaporates at a much quicker pace. That, along with the amount of animals drinking from a certain watering hole like this one, it'll get quite muddy. And this one in particular here, Tau, seems like it have the potential to become a proper mud wallow. if that should be the case, then you find that sometimes some of these animals might get stuck. I can see some of these wildebeest seem very, very rounded in the belly. Some of the females. And they're also starting to show that they're pregnant. And we're also coming up to that time of the year. In another 2 months, 3 months, we should start to see some wildebeest babies. So it's important for these females to come down and drink when they need water, to have the sufficient nourishment for their young. Looks like there's more wildebeest at the back coming to the water. Looks like a different group. Kelly's asking if all herbivores get along with each other. Well, that's difficult to say for sure. Kelly, I'd say it probably depends on the situation. It probably depends on the species, and I guess the condition that they're in. They generally seem to tolerate each other, I think is a term that I'll use. The fact that they tolerate the presence of others in an area, I think the fact that they know that they're not going to get attacked. Ooh, there's another nice herd of wildebeest. But the fact that they know that they don't face any physical danger from other herbivores necessarily. Well, I mean, an elephant could certainly potentially hurt something like a wildebeest, but I mean, they don't directly compete for food. For water to an extent, and I've seen in severe droughts where water is very, very limited, where you have the general herbivores and the plains game getting at each other, and that's when you see some very, very interesting interaction between animals. Then they don't seem so tolerant always, but in this case I think there's still enough water around, so these animals seem to accept the fact that the others have to come down and drink. They try and space their periods that they go down to drink so that they don't have to encounter the others directly at the water. But yeah, if they don't directly compete for food, then they will tolerate each other. And what you have animals, even though they might feed off grass, like zebras and wildebeest and the impala, you find that they complement each other within the way they feed, and they also not directly compete. They eat different parts of the grass, they go for different types of grass, and that way they can coexist. The other fact is also they've got a common enemy in predators like the lion, for instance, and that's why the more eyes, the more ears, the better chance of survival. So the more numbers, the better for them. That's quite a impressive sight, seeing those elephants moving away. One elephant bull being markedly bigger. Now I see he's following the cow and her little one. It would be interesting to see if he follows them all the way. But he's trying to dust bathe himself, and it looks like the wind's not letting him. Spaz Yankov, I've not seen a crocodile catch a young wildebeest. I've seen a crocodile catch an impala once. Um, I've seen a crocodile feed on a wildebeest that I presume it caught, since there were no other predators or anything else around, and it was a rather big crocodile, so I'm assuming it had the or it caught the wildebeest, but I never witnessed it in the act. And I've seen that in Northern Kruger Park. I've seen it in Western Kruger Park. Um, yeah, I know at one of the reserves that I've worked at before, I've seen videos and a photo of a crocodile that caught a pangolin, which was a very, very interesting thing. Pangolins, oddly enough, also go down to the water to wallow and to cool themselves down. They actually like swimming quite a bit. And in areas where they get reintroduced and they might not necessarily have the know how or the understanding of the fact that there could be danger in the water, if on a hot day they move down to the water, that would be the perfect opportunity for a crocodile. But having said that, pangolins rarely move during a day unless there is some reason for them being disturbed, or they have grown up in captivity and they're not used to the natural routine. Now, there's an interesting bird moving there at the back between the wildebeest and the elephants, and from what I can see, it looks like it's guinea fowl, if I'm not mistaken. That's a bird I haven't seen here yet. It's amazing to see how those elephants are just disappearing into the distance. You can see that big elephant bull is still trailing them. So unfortunately for that cow and her offspring, I think they're going to have a very unwanted companion for the next little while. Heather, I don't know if those elephants could climb that hill there in the background. I wouldn't put it beneath them. They are certainly quite capable of moving upwards and climbing quite steep hills. I've seen elephants go up mountainous pathways where you'll be very, very surprised. And I found elephant tracks on areas where you would never think elephants would move. But you can see, if we look at this bull now, I can see it's got a little bit of a sloped backside. It's got very, very long forelegs, and the back legs are shorter, so they can lift those forelegs, the forelimbs up quite high. So if they have to go up steep hills, that aids them. I think they struggle a little bit more going down sometimes, but they are quite capable of moving up steep and even rocky areas. So I wouldn't be surprised if they could. So these animals have been quite good at giving us a nice show here at the heat of the day. I think as they move off, we'll head over to Old Danyo and see what we have at that watering hole. Pretty amazing. Spectacular elephant bull and some young male giraffe. It looks like a monkey there in the background, or a baboon. Might be mistaken, it might be a baboon. Giraffe looks very thirsty. I can see its tongue going in. Oh, something spooked it. You can see the elephants not too concerned. Certainly paid attention, but not too concerned. That's something I always find fascinating about giraffe. They are so nervous around watering holes, and we could see that giraffe was dying to drink, but very nervous. And whatever it is that spooked him was quite unfortunate. But this big elephant bull seems to be just taking it easy and resting his trunk over his tusk. It looks like a very old bull or mature bull. By the looks of it, not in any hurry anyway. You can see the one tusk looks like it broke off. You can see on the side there, it looks like it's got a split. Doesn't look recent. It's already been worn down again, but thankfully it's still got that longer left tusk of his. Very tatty ears. And that very conspicuous tear in its right ear. So this must be quite an easily recognizable elephant bull. There's some baboons moving there in the background. Jive Bunny, that's very interesting to hear that there's an elephant called 1 ton at Oldonyo, and he's a tusker. That's something I find, or something that's quite remarkable about this area, is that there is certainly some elephants with very, very big tusks in this region, and East Africa is known for elephants with very large tusks. Now, what I've heard is that apparently 1 ton can be quite a bit of a bully. So that would be interesting to see. I wonder if he had to come and find this elephant. It would be very, very interesting to see, seeing that this is also a very mature bull. You can see the tip of his trunk's just going back and forth. So he's definitely, well, he's paying attention to whatever scent he can pick up nearby, but he's definitely standing there for a reason, I think. He's waiting and hoping, and maybe something might happen, or others, something might come down. It looks like it's a very, very productive little watering hole. I can see it doesn't look too big, but I can see that the ground's very trampled around it, meaning lots of animals come down. The baboon in the background is just waiting its turn. Now I'm wondering if this elephant's not paying attention to them, and maybe they know him. Maybe they know that he might not take too kindly to them coming down at the same time. It looks like he's having a big gulp of water there. So it's just something else to remind our viewers about as we jump over to the Juma African is the Meet the Wild Earth Leopards with Cedric Dole. Now that sounds like a very, very exciting event. It will be in March next year, and it'll be for 6 people. There's only 2 spots left as well. And of course, this is in high demand. It's a very, very popular chance. And to actually get to meet some of these leopards and the hyenas that you see daily on Wild Earth, to get to meet them in person, see them in their environment, what a very, very unique opportunity. And there'll also be evenings around the fire with Cedric, and he'll be telling some fantastic bush stories related to some of the animals and not. But you'll be able to see the Wild Earth broadcast vehicle and see them as they are filming. So you'll literally be able to be put in the environment with these famous leopards, as well as to see and get the chance to see how Wild Earth operates. Now this is quite interesting. We can see the winds blowing quite steadily here. And there's quite tall tufts of grass near this watering hole. But I've got a male Nyala that's come down to drink here. Not something too common in the Lowveld, in the central regions of the Lowveld. I mean, around the riverbeds and the denser areas, there's always a chance of seeing Nyala, but they're quite shy creatures, prefer the dense areas. I'm guessing this one is quite a well-known resident, and he must know this area quite well. To be brazen enough to come out on his own to come and have a drink. And let's see, it looks like he's throwing his head side to side. I suspect we might see him churn up some mud and add some mud to those horns of his. Now we can see, oof, what a beautiful bull. You can see he's really getting into it there. Imagine having to rub your face in wet mud every time before you need to step out. Try and make yourself look as good as possible. In this case, for the ladies. Judging from his size, I'd say he's got a very, very thick neck, so he's very likely one of the more dominant bulls in the area. And what he's doing is essentially he's adding to that size of him. That mud that sits on the horns makes them look a little bit thicker, a little bit bigger, makes them look more impressive. And I'm curious to see why he would have done that. I'm sure there might be some females in this region. Jive Bunny, I also enjoy and really like the yellow socks of them. They serve a very, very valuable function, and it's camouflage. Like moving through the thicker bush, often you can see how yellow this dried out grass is currently. Now they go up just to above the knee or the ankle, and what's interesting is once they move into the denser bush, the top part, the darker part of the body, blends in quite easily amongst the thick brush. But of course, if it had dark legs, those would stand out when they're moving, because there's still a lower part below the shrubs that you... Now we might see it in action. Here we go. And see almost seamlessly kind of disappear into the denser vegetation. So that yellow socks of his camouflages its legs, and it kind of blends into the grass at the lower level where the sun sometimes does highlight the vegetation. And if it was dark, like the upper part of the body, then of course that the movement of those legs would stick out quite easily, especially for a predator that might be stalking low down, like for instance the leopard, or even a lion, a single lion on its own. For a moment there I wasn't sure what I was seeing, but I realize now it's an Egyptian goose. Glad to see that there's at least one pair at this watering hole as well. I'm not surprised. It's a bird that's quite visibly colonized most watering holes throughout the Lowveld and even further into South Africa's interior. And it's one of the birds that you're almost sure to see wherever you have a large body of water on any reserve. And they also certainly make their presence known. You can see there's some very nice dense green vegetation around the watering hole still. So I'm sure that there's every chance that predators might be lurking about even though we're not seeing them. By the looks of it, it looks like the grass is quite trampled here under this tree. Maybe it was animals utilizing the shade earlier on when it was very, very hot. Well, it looks like everything is quite peaceful currently here, and it's been nice to catch up with some of the antelopes here, Juma. But let's go see. I've heard we've got some birds at Tembe, so let's go see what birds do we have there. Oh, there's a grey heron. Let's see what birds we can find here now. Now, I just want to remind everybody that I am keeping a bird list. Sometimes I miss the bird's specifications to determine exactly which species it is when I'm looking at the other animals or so. So I don't always, sometimes I might even misidentify one or two birds. Like the other day, I'm pretty sure I called one of the moor hens at Tau a black crake. But I can see over here what looks like a three-banded plover in the background. I can see a grey heron standing out on the bank. Definitely eyeing something down in the water there. So we'll keep an eye on to see what's happening about. These birds are often a good bird to watch because they might not always seem as active or busy, but they are quite successful hunters around the water's edge. What a beautiful scene. You can see some of those palms there. Looks like some lala palms. I can see some damage from the elephant. Sometimes the elephants will eat those palm fronds and they'll tear it down, and you can actually see how it's stripped down. One of the theories suggested that's why they are cropped down at this level, but there's also the fact that these palms have a growth spurt in which they reach their taller levels, and a lot of other things determine that as well, like the type of soil. But they get eaten by the elephants for their fiber to aid in digestion. There's some Egyptian geese. Looks like they're all busy preening. Maybe they're taking this break from all the elephants to kind of straighten their feathers out. You can see a bit of a stretch there. Looks like some young ones in between. What a beautiful scene. And what a beautiful day here at Tembe. I mentioned earlier that the last 2 days were a little bit overcast. So it's very, very nice to see the sunlight light up all these green colors. And then the reflection of the blue sky and the water. Now, one thing that's amazing about this area is it tends to keep water very, very well. And the soils hold whatever rain comes that way in these little pans for quite a long time. And some of them are almost permanent. A valuable added benefit of this region. But an amazing area indeed. You can see all these little patches look like erosion patches, all dust bowls dug by elephants dusting themselves. It gets very, very hot in this region. In summertime, the humidity is extremely high. And that's when elephants tend to cover themselves with the dust, especially. But what an amazing afternoon we've had. We've had the crocodile, we've had the baboons and their mischief around the watering holes. We've had some beautiful elephant sightings all over, including here, and some beautiful birds. It's been a fantastic afternoon with beautiful weather. And thank you to all our viewers, and I really hope that you join us again tomorrow for some more action around the watering holes.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us once again for our highlight show. We are coming here directly from Ajuma Private Game Reserve here in the northern Sabi Sands. My name is Cedric, and behind the camera with me, we've got Muscles. Paul. Yes, and for the next 30 minutes, we're going to discuss exactly what we've been seeing over the last 24 hours, as well as we'll go to the other naturalists to see exactly what their plans are for this afternoon. This is On Safari. Well, as you know, this is a live and interactive show. So if you've got any comments or any questions, suggestions that you want to send through to us this afternoon, you're on the highlight show. If you're watching on the Wild Earth YouTube channel, try and join up as a member. Remember, if you join up as a member, you get some amazing benefits. You can watch these shows ad-free, as well as you can pause and rewind whenever you want to. Or if you're watching on the Wild Earth website, that is wildearth.tv. Make sure that you do register, and then you can send those things through. Or if you just want to have a good old chat with us, just go on to hashtag WildEarth on X.